I want to take you behind the scenes to my own reporting and go back to an incident from March of 2022. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine was 2 weeks old. I was on my way to Ukraine. There were and still are no flights into Ukraine, so I flew into Budapest, the capital of Hungary. And there I bore witness, often live on air, to the tens of thousands of Ukrainian refugees arriving exclusively by train, mainly women and children escaping the war with just the possessions that they could carry. Most of them could not speak Hungarian, which has virtually no overlap with the Ukrainian language or with Russian. They had no idea where they would go to or what they needed to do next. They were greeted by the Hungarian people, who were there to help in any way they could, to offer guidance, a place to stay, a meal, medical and humanitarian aid, a kind word. My reporting on Hungary was based on the facts, on what I was learning and seeing play out firsthand, and the important context that was needed to explain the story. And at times I noted that while Hungary and the Hungarian people were helping their neighbors who were under attack by Russia, Hungary's longtime leader, Viktor Orban, maintained a close relationship with Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin. And despite being a member of NATO, Hungary joined in 1999 during Orban's first stint as prime minister, Hungary had developed a closer, friendlier relationship with Russia during Orban 2.0. Orban had been serving as prime minister since 2010. He had previously held the position from 1998 through 2002. During my reporting in Budapest, I noted that under Orban's long rule, Hungary had seen a significant backsliding of democracy and of democratic institutions, including a crackdown on rights, an increase in corruption, an increase in extreme anti-immigration policy, a weakening of the independent judiciary, and the near elimination of the independent press, including the creation of a state-run media. Now, I am not a scholar of Hungary, and what I was reporting was not some grand secret. Much of it Orban and his government actively and publicly promoted. Nonetheless, Orban took offense to my reporting, and his office sent a letter detailing his disagreements, to keep it polite, to MSNBC, accusing me of aiding the opposition party in the then upcoming elections. While a ridiculous situation, a prime minister whose country neighbors a nation under invasion complaining about me, an American journalist, to my boss, it was ridiculous, but actually unsurprising. What Hungary became under Orban 2.0 has often been described as an illiberal democracy, a form of government in which elections take place but opposition is suppressed. Freedoms are not guaranteed, rights are restricted, rulers are dominant and often undermine constitutional limits on power or alter the Constitution to gain more power. In essence, an illiberal democracy can be thought of as a limited democracy and can be a precursor to full-fledged autocracy. In an infamous and often cited speech given shortly after winning re-election in 2014, Orban cited China, Turkey, and Russia as models that the Hungary he was building would emulate. He even proclaimed, quote, "The new state that we are constructing in Hungary is an illiberal state. It does not reject the fundamental principles of liberalism, such as freedom, but it does not make this ideology the central element of state organization, but instead includes a different, special, national approach," end quote. In other words, the rights and freedoms of individuals isn't the top priority, the so-called national interest is. And with Orban's tight grip on power and the government, he controlled and dictated what that national interest is, which should sound frighteningly familiar to Americans, because what happened in Hungary under Orban appears to be happening, and in some cases has already happened, in America under Trump. A shift toward illiberal democracy. And that's why the results of last Sunday's parliamentary elections in Hungary are so important. Fidesz, the party Orban helped start in 1990 and which he's led for 33 of the past 36 years, suffered an overwhelming loss to the opposition party, TISA, which is led by Peter Magyar, the likely next prime minister. Orban was defeated despite last-minute in-person support from the American Vice President J.D. Vance and public endorsements from President Trump, who had a close personal and political relationship with Orban. It's important to note that Orban's loss does not represent some giant ideological turn in Hungary. Magyar and his governing coalition are actually a little to the right of center-right. But what it does represent is a rejection of far-right authoritarian rule and of Orban's illiberal democracy. And it's not just in a figurative sense either. One of the first things Magyar did after the election was to appear on several Hungarian state-controlled TV stations to announce that he would be shutting them down. He called them, quote, lying news service and a propaganda machine, adding that after we form the government, one of our very first tasks will be to shut down this factory of lies and build a real independent public broadcaster. one where the opposition finally has a voice too. The opposition can have a voice. You can have people in politics with different ideologies. One person and one party do not need to hold power forever. Anne Applebaum makes this point in an important new piece in The Atlantic titled, "Illiberalism is Not Inevitable." And as for what this represents on a global scale, Applebaum argues if Viktor Orban can lose, then his Russian and American admirers can lose too. Quote, after 16 years of what Orban himself described as an illiberal regime, the Hungarian leader's political party had come to control much of the judiciary, the bureaucracy, and universities, as well as a group of oligarchic companies that in turn controlled a good chunk of the economy. Nobody is pretending this will be easy. Fidesz still dominates many Hungarian institutions and businesses, and the party's friends and supporters will do their best to undermine a TISA government. Orban also leaves behind a fiscal mess. But whatever happens next, this election represents a real turning point. For most European governments, this result is a relief. We can't know yet what kind of government TISA will create, but it won't be one that functions as Russia's puppet in Europe, nor will it be a regime that serves as a model for Americans or Europeans who want to capture their own states or take apart their own checks and balances or impose their own illiberal ideologies on people who will not accept them, end quote.